Hey everybody, I'm Z Garcia, and today I'm taking a look at a two-player card game called Tilting at Windmills. In this tiny card game, one player is going to be Don Quixote, the other player will be Sancho Panza, and they are going to be running at each other in order to score a hit on a giant, a would-be giant, or perhaps stop themselves in time and simply realize it is a windmill instead and score a windmill. And so the players are sort of playing a big game of chicken in which they're playing cards, moving towards one another in order to score those victory points. The giants usually are more victory points, but it's a higher risk, higher reward scenario. Whereas the windmills, you will not be penalized for taking one of those in any way, but they are fewer victory points. Let me just give you a look at how it all works together. We'll come on back after that, and I'll tell you what I think of it. In this game, one player is going to be taking on the role of Don Quixote, the other player will be Sancho Panza, and they are going to be playing cards from their hand, moving towards each other in order to score and gather these cards, which are either a giant, depending on where the players meet, or a windmill on the other side of that card. So each round, to set up, first of all, each player is going to shuffle up their deck of cards. They get 2 goal cards from the deck of goal cards over here, and they also begin with 7 lances that are intact. They will shuffle up their own decks, which are made up of cards number 1 through 5, and they are going to draw a hand of 4 cards, and then you are ready to begin. And so on your turn, you are going to play 1 card. So I'll move the goals aside just for now. For a second, I'll come back to those in just a minute. So you are going to play a card, and then you are going to move towards the center of the track, as many spaces as the number on the card. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you draw a replacement card. The other player will do that. So let's say this player might play a 3, 1, 2, 3, draw a replacement, and so on until these 2 characters are face to face, or one would cross the other one. So let's say, for example, that this player is here. It is Don Quixote's turn, and they are going to play a 3, 1, 2, 3, which brings the characters face to face there. At that point, whoever made that final move to have the 2 characters meet or pass one another is going to score this card here on top. And they will take it. The players will reset their pieces to wherever the next card tells them. In this case, space 23, which is right here for this player, and right over here for this player. And they will continue playing. Which side of this card the players acquire is based on where they meet. So if they meet across the bridge, like so, or farther this way, then it is the giant that you get. You must break as many lances as it lists, and you will take this card here. If it happens on the other side of the board, like so, then you get the windmill, which is fewer points, but you don't need to break any lances to do so. And the game, as I said, is going to continue until either all of these cards are gone, or one player has broken all of their lances, at which point the other player simply wins. Otherwise, when we finish the game, you add up your victory points here. So, besides that, let's set our characters back on their starting spots here. There are a few special actions printed on the board, and these are technically optional, but I would say you really want to play with them. The other side has the same boards, but they are blank of those special powers. You really want them in there. They're very simple anyway, and they're going to add a little bit of interest to the action in the game. And so the few things are, this one, for example, allows you to play a second card. If you land there, you can play another card right away and move again. This one here allows you to push either one of the characters 2 spaces towards the center. This one here forces the opponent to discard their whole hand and draw 4 new cards. This repairs 1 lance. This repairs 2 lances. This pushes a character away from the center, 1 or 2 spaces. This one here allows you to discard as many cards as you want to and draw replacements. And this one allows you to look at your opponent's hand. That's all they do. Very simple, but they add a little bit of interest to the game. And this is going to continue this way, with players always making sure they play and draw back up to 4 cards. Besides that, there are the goals that the players have here, which are going to list something across the top In this case, for example, this card requires a giant of level 1, a 1 victory point giant, and a 2 victory point giant. And you can play this on your turn and get whatever the thing on the bottom is. In this case, you get 2 lances back. With this one, you get 6 lances back. With this one, you are going to get a 3 windmill and a 3 giant, gets you 4 victory points and 2 lances. And some of them simply give you victory points, such as this one here for 2 windmills, 3 victory points each. You get 5 bonus victory points for the end of the game. That's really all there is to it. You are just playing cards from your hand, moving towards one another, playing a little bit of a game of chicken to figure out who makes the killing blow, but also sometimes, if your opponent is running low on lances, drawing them in so that they have to move towards you and they have to be the ones to close that gap, finish breaking all of their lances, which you do by flipping these over to their broken side, and if you break the last one, you are eliminated and your opponent is going to win. That's really all there is to it. So let's go back up top, now that you have an idea of how the game works, and let me tell you what I think of it. Alright, so let's talk about this. I'm going to start with thematic ties. Is the game original? Is it well implemented? You know, I would say for the most part it is. It's a nice theme. It's well used. It's a theme that, you know, the idea of the windmill or the giant on the other side, that's cool. The idea of the lances breaking, if you score a giant hit, that's neat. You want to do that, but you got to be careful about running out of lances. The idea of having your opponent get close to breaking all their lances, and so you try to have them run into you on the giant side of the board in order to break their final lance. Also interesting. As far as the actual theme and story as compared to the game, it doesn't really make sense. These characters would not be opposing one another. Sancho Panza would not be attacking a giant, for instance. So, you know, it's a stretch, certainly, to make it work for the game, but I do feel it's an interesting and original theme utilized fairly well. The aesthetics, component quality, congruent artwork, things like that. I think the artwork is fine for the most part. Card quality is not so good. The cards, some of them are damaged, actually, right out of the box, and they are very thin. They don't seem like they are going to hold up well to repeated play. The artwork, like I said, is all right, and then the iconography on the board, especially, it's really the only place that there is substantial iconography, is simple. I do wish that they had come up with a different symbol for the characters moving towards one another and the characters moving away from one another. It's technically the exact same symbol, they're just on 2 different spaces. So if you reference where it is printed in reference to the center of the board, yes, it kind of makes sense, but they could have easily done 2 arrows pointing at one another and 2 arrows pointing away from one another and have the 2 icons be different. Minor thing, but you know, it's one of those things that could have been fixed easily. And as I said, the rest of the quality of the components is just okay to not great. The replayability, does it show you new things to discover as you are playing? Will you be coming back to this much later on? I don't think so. There's not a lot of replayability here. Once you've played this game once even, you've sort of seen everything there is to see. You understand what it expects of its players and the sort of challenges that it's going to present. You know, this idea of, again, playing a big game of chicken. When do I make that killing blow? Do I allow myself to take a turn which positions me 5 spaces away from my opponent, which is the most that they could, you know, that's the closest that you could be to them, in which they could play a single card and boom, close the gap, score a point, score a hit, if you would. And so that's a pretty apparent thing. It's a pretty obvious thing. You'll figure that out 2 turns in, and then the rest of the game, there's nothing really interesting or crunchy to discover. Even the goal cards are all basically the same thing for the most part. After the first game, you won't see anything new. So I think the replayability is not great. Game length, is it interesting the whole time? Does it get repetitive? It does, unfortunately, get repetitive. There is a variant in the rulebook I want to mention. They call it Blitz Mode or Chow, you know, I forget what they call it, something like that, in which they tell you to remove a few charge mode. There it is. They tell you to remove a few of those windmill / giant cards, but honestly, if you're not using, when you do that, you don't use the goal cards. I like the gold cards. They're a little extra something to give me some focus in the game, but 15 cards is just a little too long. And as a filler, simple, tiny little 2-player card game, I think playing through all 15 of the Windmill cards outstays its welcome. You know, it makes the game outstay its welcome. So I do think it's too long, and I'm not really happy about that. There should have simply been some of those removed from the game. Ease of play, is it fiddly? Are there any extraneous rules? Is it easy to teach? Things like that. I do think it's easy to teach. I like the idea of where the characters meet, it being important as to what they are technically fighting. So this is not a problem to teach, and the story of you know, being familiar with Don Quixote does make a little bit of sense as to helping the players teach why you're fighting a windmill or a giant. And you know, if someone is not familiar with that story, that would be quite strange, but it's well implemented and it's easy to teach. And lastly, tactics and strategies. Are too lucky? Is it balanced? Are there interesting choices in it? I think it's interesting. I mean, to play the game is cute. It's interesting, but the choices, as far as being engaging choices, are just not there. You know, on your turn, you are going to play, maybe trigger a little power on the board. Never mind, by the way, playing on the side that has no powers whatsoever, that's just dull, you know. But if you have a couple of little powers on your side, repair a lance, things like that, move yourself forward or your opponent, or move someone back away, that's cute. And so it can have a couple of little tactics like that, right? Your opponent's running low on lances, as I said. Yeah, you can try to run them out of all the ones they've got. But it's just, there's very little here, really. At the end of the day, you are not doing a whole lot. You are hoping to slow down and draw your opponent in, make that killing blow, or force them to be the ones to run into you every now and then, again, for a final, like, to end the game and win that way. But it's all very obvious. It's all very apparent as to what you should be doing. You have a hand of 4 cards anyway. If you don't have high numbers, then you don't, and you just play your 1s or 2s. Not a lot going on. Ultimately, the game is a cute exercise in adding a neat literary theme to a 2-player card game, but the replay value and the interest of choices, it's just not there. It needed a little something else. Maybe all the cards in the player deck not simply being numbers 1 through 5. Maybe some of the cards in there should have been little powers. Maybe just you know, leaving only the powers on the board was not engaging and interesting enough. Maybe the goals could have been a little more varied. They're all basically the same thing. So this one is very much lacking. There's a kernel of a good idea in there, and I can appreciate that, but the game needed more development, I think. They needed more in there to make for some replay value, you know? So, as it is, tilting at Windmills, I would say it's certainly a pass. There's so many better card games out there, and even some that have this kind of, you know, one-upmanship or big game of chicken sort of feel, that you really don't need to concern yourself with this one. So there you go. That's it for me on this review. Thanks for checking this out. I will see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com.